This is the Journey Podcast. We highlight the journeys of our guests, where they've been, where they are now, and where they are going. Let's join them on their journey. Welcome to the Journey Podcast. Today we are joined by Brenden Kumarasamy. And today Brenden is the founder of Master Talk, and he provides services in the area of helping people with public speaking as a public speaking executive coach and helping them with corporate training. And he helps leaders become among the 1% of speakers in their field. And I just love what you do because I think, isn't that like the number one thing people say that they're afraid of is speaking in front of people? Brenden, so how you doing today? We're really glad you're here to speak with us.
Hey, the pleasure is absolutely mine, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So tell us a little bit about what you do with Master Talk and how you work with your clients.
Yeah, for sure, Nate. So the story all started when I was in college. I went to business school, and I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds.
Okay.
So while other guys, yeah, it's kind of a good way of
Like
understanding.
e-gaming?
Sort of. So other guys my age were playing football. I was doing presentations competitively. So that's what I did growing up.
Wait. I almost fell asleep. I'm sorry. What? No, I'm kidding. It sounds great, right? You know, like
Right.
that I do understand what you mean. I could probably compete in that. So as many presentations as I do. Tell me more.
Right. And by the way, it should sound boring for most people, or else I would really question most people. But yes. So the reason why most of us did it, Nate, wasn't really for fun. It's because a lot of executives come to these competitions, and it's a great way for people to get jobs. That's why I
Right.
did them.
Okay, I got it.
Right.
That's
So
awesome.
it wasn't because I woke up every morning and said, "Yes, I need to spend the rest of my life working on presentations." Definitely wasn't the case. So then when I got older, I started coaching a lot of people in those programs on how to speak. Not because I was some coach. It's because the alternative they had was a pile of rocks, so they went with me.
Okay.
And right, and that's how I started honing my craft, and I got really good at coaching. And that's what led to the YouTube channel Master Talk, because I felt that everything that I was sharing with the world, or rather with my community, wasn't available for free on the internet. So I just started making videos in my mom's basement a long time ago, and then Master Talk just turned into like a massive media and coaching practice a few years later.
So you went to business school. Of course, you started a business. But before you got interested in competing with speaking competitions, were you interested in speaking before, like their younger years of speech and debate tournaments or anything like that?
You know, I wish the answer was yes, but the truth is actually no. My whole life I sucked at communication, Nate, and the reason is because there's a couple. So the first one is I grew up in a city called Montreal in Canada.
Okay,
For
good
those who
city.
don't, right, there you go. Where are you based, by the way?
Cleveland, Ohio. So we're
Yeah.
not far from Montreal, but just far enough that I haven't gotten there yet. How's that? So
No, it's all good. I was in Columbus last week, so there you go.
awesome.
Right. So yeah, the key is the first piece is in Montreal, for those who don't know who are listening to this pod, French is a required language there, which is a
Right.
language I didn't know. So my whole life, not only did I struggle with speaking, Nate, I was presenting in a language I didn't know.
Hmm.
So that's one. Second one is I have a crooked left arm because of a surgery I had when I was younger. So it was really hard for me to make friends. And you would think that the communication guy has a communications degree. Yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in accounting, so there you go.
Wow. So you've kind of taken a little bit different path here, but overcoming challenges has led this to you. So spoke a little bit about the arm. Does that give you a better fastball at sports or
I'm not that much of a sports guy, remember, I'm just a nerd. So
Montreal? So you probably watch hockey, right? That's what everybody thinks, right?
some. I watch some hockey. I've been to a lot of Habs games. A
Okay.
lot of Canadian, like Bill, if you're listening, because I have to keep getting Montreal Canadiens, we just call them Habs. It's like a cocky team. But yeah, I definitely I've been to like 25 games. Yeah.
Okay. Hockey is mostly where they beat each other up, is my perception of it, because that's all I ever see when I go to a hockey game is they're like hurting each other, and
He was like,
we have a great time watching it ourselves. So,
there you go.
so when you got into public speaking, did you feel like it was something that came easy to you, or was this something that was hard, like you really had to work at it to study it?
I would say definitely the second piece where it was hard at the beginning and then easier later on, where, I had a lot of anxiety from my past experience as a speaker because I spoke French most of my life. But then when I switched back to English, because that's what I studied in college in English, I got my confidence back. So it was a lot easier for me to transition to the person I am today, and a lot of it got a lot easier.
So, and I'm going to continue down that line for just a minute. Reading in history, or some people are just seem to be natural born speakers. Do you believe that people are natural born speakers, or is it a craft that everybody has to get better at?
I definitely think some people have that natural gift. Do I think everyone is a made speaker? Not necessarily. I think most of them definitely have both. Where like for me, I'm not gonna deny the fact that I don't have some natural talent. I'm sure some of it's natural, but most of it's earned. Like I had presented like 400 or 500 times in university. I've been on hundreds of podcasts. That's how I really refined my skill set. It's not just jumping up and down doing somersaults and saying, "Yeah, I'm a great speaker." Yeah, it definitely wasn't the case.
So you really feel like some of the value that you can bring to people that you coach is, hey, I've been there. I'm not the natural born speaker. I've had to work hard to be where I'm at, and you can do it too.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
So, why do you think it's good or important for a business leader to be good at speaking?
Right. For business leader, I would say the following, right? So there's two different ways of answering that question. If you're a business owner, you own the business versus if you're in the business and you're an executive. So let's tackle both.
Okay.
The first one, which is the CEO, I would always tell them like, are your communication skills scaling with your business? So what does that mean quite simply? If your business is doing 100 grand a year, you're usually doing everything. Sales,
Mhm.
marketing, delivery, ascension. Ascension, for those who are listening, just means like you're upselling them into other services, you're keeping them for a long period of time. But when your business is doing $500,000, you can't do all of that yourself anymore. There's too many customers. So you got to delegate to other people. But are your communication skills ready for that level of business? Because when you have a bunch of employees and you start delegating, if you don't know how to communicate properly, they're going to come up to you and go, "What did you ask me to do, Nate? Like, what am I
Mhm.
supposed to do, Brenden? I don't really get it." And you're creating a lot of inefficiencies and time wasted and potentially resignations. People are just going to be like, "Yeah, I don't want to work with this guy or gal. I'm out of here." So there's that, right? People don't assume as business owners that their business will actually become successful, which I think is funny. So let's say they're doing 100 grand. They're like, "Yeah, I don't need anything." I was like, "Okay, but what if, do you want the business to do $1 million someday?" They're like, "Yeah." So I was like, "Are you preparing for that reality? Because if you're not preparing for it, that reality will never happen." So that's the advice for business owners. For leaders, it's more about what do they want in the future and how do we tie what they want for communication. Classic example, executive wants to be a C level, they want to get their next promotion. Well, are you communicating like the person at that level? And the answer is often no.
Interesting. I like those analogies a lot, and thinking through like, how do you get better at communication? I know the answer for myself, but what is an easy way for a business owner? Let's focus on owner for a minute, to practice better communication.
So what's great, Nate, is that the answer is actually the same across the board. So let me start with context first. Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, right? So one of those balls is body language, another one is storytelling, eye contact, vocal tone variety, and the list can get really daunting. So instead, the focus is what are the three easiest balls that we can juggle in the air. So let's start with number one, and I'll throw the ball back to you. So the first one is the random word exercise. Pick a random word like trophy, like case, like light bulb, like computer screen, and create random presentations out of thin air.
Hmm.
And the reason this is so effective is because it helps you think on your feet. If you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. And that's really the benefit of doing this a few times a day.
Hmm. That's interesting. Um, You could dive into it. Maybe we could dive into a coaching session here on the Journey podcast today and just check that out. Um, do you think, um, or rather, what is one thing in the business of? I have written down here speaking coach, but it really sounds like you're a communications coach, which is it's speaking, but it's probably also written. And what is one thing in this business that you didn't really expect to happen?
Huh, that's an interesting question. What did I expect not to happen? I mean, I would say the one thing I didn't expect was, and that sounds kind of weird, but how lucrative it actually is.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people don't actually have the skill set of coach. Because knowing how to communicate is one thing, but know how to coach somebody else on how to communicate is a completely different skill set. And the reason is because most people who are great communicators never become coaches. They're often politicians, CEOs of their own businesses. They usually go into, some of them even go into sports. Like they go in everything but coaching, right? Because you have to take somebody else on that journey. So it surprised me of how lucrative it was. Because initially I never wanted to do it full time because I had a really good job at IBM. I didn't want to give that up. But I think it's really because of passion that I pursued Mass Talk, but I realized later, after I decided to pursue it, that you can actually do really well as a coach. That surprised me a lot. And then the other one is how quickly you can gain a name for yourself if you're really good at what you do in coaching.
So you pursued this idea of coaching, and why? Why not go start your own company? Why not run for political office? I mean, those are lucrative careers in themselves.
Absolutely. I think the simplest way to answer that, Nate, coaching's in my blood. So
Hmm.
for example, now is when I started working, that was my day job prior to this. I was a technology consultant at IBM. So I was doing very well for myself, even if I was working really hard. That was my life, doing system implementations for different countries around the world, waking up at 5 a.m., leading workshops. Quite the life. Crazy life. Let's put it that way. In a crazy way. But the point that I want to drive is I didn't have the same level of fulfillment.
Hmm.
That's what I was missing. I was making good money, but I didn't have that fulfillment. So I looked back in my last 3, 5 years and I asked myself a simple question. What actually brought me the most joy? And the answer was obvious. It was the 70 people I'd coached for free.
Hmm.
Like from 19 to 22. Those are the people I was coaching. Like those students in those nerd competitions so they could win. All of them got amazing jobs out of university. And I was a part of that, not the whole thing. And that gave me so much fulfillment. I was doing it for free long before I knew I could get paid to do it. In some ways, kind of like with Tony Robbins, where he knew at a very young age that was his calling when he started working with Jim Rohn. It just happened to be the same thing with me. I just realized it was in my blood, and I had the right mentors and partners for it, so I made it happen.
That's just important to do what you actually like to do, even if it doesn't maybe bring the immediate financial position that you should be in. It's so much better than that. So tell me, what's a common myth about public speaking and maybe public speaking coaching?
Yeah, I would say a common myth around communication is really around the fear of it. That
Hmm.
the fear is just there and we should just deal with it and our life is over. And Seinfeld says it best, I'd rather be in the casket than give the eulogy, all this stupid nonsense that the culture kind of forces on us. I think that's a myth. I think the reason why all of us are scared makes a lot of sense if you think about it. It has nothing to do with our DNA or our biology. Because if you're 5 years old and you communicate, you never had a problem communicating when you're 5. Most of
Right.
us. Right? There's something that happens along the way that trains us out of it. And the answer is the education system. Think about it, Nate. All the presentations that we give in our life are mandatory in
Hmm.
high school and elementary school. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, Nate, you want to get breakfast and present all day?" Nobody says that.
Right.
All those presentations are different. You never get to pick what you actually like. It's never, "Hey, Nate, what do you like talking about?" You talk about journeys and podcasting. No, you got to talk about Shakespearean poetry and you got to get over it. Right? And then you
Right.
have to talk about the history of Missouri, and you're like, "I don't live in Missouri. I live in Cleveland," but you
Is
still have
that
to talk.
even like a real place, right?
Yeah.
Sorry to my Missouri friends, but
it's
I'm still in
that's
doubt.
There you go, same. And then the worst thing, and I think it's still shocking, we put our kids through so much pain, like every presentation, every single one. is tied to a punishment. Like, who came up with this? Like, if you don't do a great job, you lose 25% of your grade.
Right.
So we grow up believing that communication is a chore, so it becomes one, and nobody wants to get better at doing the dishes. So that's the most common myth.
Wow. That's true. I never really thought about it that way. Like, uh, yeah, I like to talk about what I like to talk about, but I don't want to get up there and talk about things. I'm uncomfortable if I had to prepare a presentation about something I don't care about or don't know anything about. That would be the most uncomfortable thing ever. But I love to talk about what interests me, and I never really gave that any thought at all about that. So tell me, what is the biggest challenge you're facing in trying to do communication or speaking coaching?
So just to make sure I got that, you would say like the biggest challenge behind like how I'm building the business, how I'm coaching clients, is that what you're asking?
Sure. Yeah. What's the biggest challenge I would say in your business right now?
I would say the biggest challenge for me, Nate, is really top of funnel. So what that means essentially is I deliver great work. 50% of my business now is word of mouth, which is great. I'm super happy about that. And by the way, if it's not high in coaching, you're probably not really good at what you do. Just pointing that out. So lucky.
I'm looking for low end coaching myself, Brenden.
There you go. Right, so yeah, I guess there's a place and time for that. But the key is because I'm younger than most of my competitors. I would say most people who are in communication coaching, the youngest is probably in their 30s.
Okay.
But the average is 45, 50
Okay.
people who are coaching in this industry. So I don't have as exhaustive as a network because a lot of my competitors, they're the CEO of that company is just their buddy. So it's easy. So they don't do like who's actually the best person in the room. They just give them the deal, and I don't get the night of day. So I have to be a lot more creative of how I generate business. That's why I rely a lot on word of mouth to make the business work. And that's been a lot of very challenging to be because you don't have a lot of word of mouth to work with because there's no clients. So you got to build the book. Obviously now life is less challenging, but that's probably still the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it's so true to do that networking and that word of mouth, and it does take time, and it takes work, and it takes exhaustion, and it takes a lot of frustration. I'm sure of, well, am I really doing the right thing here? I can definitely relate with that. Tell me, has there been a time where you felt like you failed or you regretted doing something during this journey of being a coach?
I mean, so many. I made a crap ton of mistakes. Let me start by explaining the principle, and then I'm happy to talk about the failure. Actually, let me start the failure first. So, when I was starting my master talk, I had a brilliant idea, and I'm being sarcastic here. I'm like, wait a second, if I share my YouTube videos with university professors and college professors, wouldn't they just share my videos forever with every new group of students they would have? Like, it
Mm,
just sounds really nice on paper, doesn't it? Yeah, 50,000 emails later, it didn't work out so well. I got a lot of hate email back saying like, "You're too young, you're too this. I hate your videos and I hate your face also." And I just went, "Oh,
not
that's
very
great."
nice.
Yeah, they're not very nice. If I'd emailed 50,000 podcasters, I think my life would be in a very different place right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, which I probably should still do, but I think the point is it didn't work. But the worst part is I was stubborn because I should have stopped after 500 emails. Because I'm not kidding when I said 50,000. I just sent 500 emails every day for 100 days. And I shouldn't have done that. So, what's the lesson? The lesson is the relationship that successful people have with failure and unsuccessful people have with failure is a very different relationship, Nate. So, with
Wow.
unsuccessful people, the relationship they have with failure is the following. Oh, like I got 10 sales calls and I only got one of them to buy my product and I suck and I should give up and sit on a couch and cry all day. That's kind of what unsuccessful people do. Whereas what successful people do is they'll do 50 calls and sell one. 49 rejections, one. You know what the successful person goes? Successful person says, "Holy moly, I sold something. My goodness." Let me do the math here. If every time I sell something I get $2,000 and I got 49 rejections and one yes, if I just do 5,000 calls, I'll make $200,000. So let's go on 5,000 calls. And that's why most people lose is the relationship that they have with failure is reverse. It's broken versus what successful people do is they go like, oh, like if I just became successful after X number of reps, let me just multiply that by 1,000 and I'll win.
Wow. That's a great way to flip it, I think. I had the question comes to mind now as my mind rabbit trails here on the journey is when you speak, do you speak about what does Brenden speak about? I have to assume that a speaking coach has to speak to stay fresh.
Do you mean like speaking like at a conference or just in
Absolutely. Tell us what you speak about. Like you just spoke a great speech about failure right there, and I loved it. I wanted to stand up and yell, which I probably should, but I might knock something over in the studio
yeah,
here.
you might break something, yeah.
Yeah.
So what I speak about speaking. Like just, funny enough, just before this call, my last call was a 90-minute workshop I gave where I was just yelling my heart out for 90 minutes about communication. That's my main expertise. But of course, on a podcast, based on what the host will ask me, I'll always, transfer over to different knowledge that I have. And that just comes with experience. But I wouldn't say I'm a failure or an expert on failure or any of that stuff. But it's just, I think it's good, especially on a podcast, to be well versed across a multitude of subjects because it just makes you a more interesting person. I mean, no one just wants to keep listening to the same topic over and over and over again.
It's so true, but yeah, also interesting what the speaking coach goes and speaks about. I think is fascinating. So, tell me, what do you think is the most important trait that somebody needs to be able to speak well?
Pretty simple. Consistency.
Okay.
Right, so let's say we take the random word exercise. That's not hard. Pick a random word, like trophy, give a random presentation. I don't even care how well it is. A lot of people ask what's the formula, what's the framework, and I always respond with you don't get points on how well you do it. You get points on how many times you do it. That's where people get stuck. Because everyone is going to make up an excuse not to do that. Right? Like Beryl Solomon, one of my coaches, he says, are you making an excuse to do the thing or not do the thing? So a lot of people might say, oh, I don't have 10 minutes to do this, Brenden. And my response is always, do you shower every day? And they go, yeah. And I was like, you got 10 minutes there. Are you doing anything else in the shower? They go, no. So there you go. Just some people figure out a way to do it, Nate. And that's the key. It's consistencies. Are you willing to do this enough? Or if you've done it 3,000 times like me, well, of course, communication becomes a lot easier.
Practice makes perfect. And maybe for the audience here today, I think it'd be fun. We talked before about doing a little quick, I don't know if you can do this quickly, a coaching session of me and tell me where would you start or how would you coach somebody like Nate, the podcaster?
Right, Nate. So let's go through it. So there's a couple of things I would say, but let's keep it simple today so you're not overwhelmed. I would start with what's your vision, right? So I'll customize this to you. Like for example, let's just make this a little bit more interactive. Who's one podcast host you really admire their interview style? So what would your answer be to that question?
Oh wow, I really think Gary Vaynerchuk is
Vaynerchuk.
very interesting as a host.
Fascinating. Why is that?
He's just willing to say whatever the heck comes out of his brain. Sometimes is very honest and very blunt. So I think he's very interesting. Off the top of my head.
Love that. I'm a big fan of Gary Vee as well. So then my next question would be, what's one thing that you feel Gary Vee does better than you at communication that you can work on?
I think just being brutally honest. Just being brutally honest. I like to take the edge off a little bit too much. I overthink it and I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. But he has a way of just saying it, but didn't hurt my feelings. I was like, oh yeah, I should have done that anyways.
Hmm. So it's really that brutal honesty piece.
Yeah.
So then the third question would simply be, how can you bring more of that brutal honesty in your interview style?
Okay. I think maybe not trying to be as I don't want to say not as nice, but just trying to be more honest about the style. Like I want to hear more about your personal story, Brenden, rather than about your brand.
Right, and the only, by the way, great job. And the only caveat I would add, Nate, is remember Gary V's Gary V and Nate's Nate. So you can still do that, but you can do that in your own way. So you don't have to go like, I need you, Brenden, to tell me what that's more Gary V. You could just say like, hey, Brenden, I heard about your personal story is great, but I'd love for us to dive in deeper if you don't mind on that and ask you a follow-up question there. So you're still getting the same information. It's just the style is different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah,
There you go.
great coaching session. So
Done.
please, we don't have a budget on the journey
You're all good. It's my special gift for having me on the show.
for the journey audience. So I hopefully it speaks volumes to our listeners here today. What would be one piece of advice you would give to somebody starting now, trying to start on that speaking and communication journey? They're saying, I'm not very good at it. Where do I start?
I would start with this question, and the question is, how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Simple as that. A lot of us, we dream about our Bugattis, our expensive cars, watches, homes, experiences we want to go on. When was the last time we dreamed about a world in which we're a better communicator in it? And the answer for most of us, my friend, is never. Never. None of us ever dream about a world in which we're a better communicator in. So I would start the conversation there because communication is so much more than getting an extra sale or getting a promotion. It's the way that we talk to our families, Nate. It's the way that we order food at a restaurant. It's the way that we make friends when we travel. It's about leading a more fulfilling life. And when we realize that, then we're going to be excited about doing the random word exercise every day.
That's awesome. So tell us about something a little bit deeper, a little off the trail here, but some of your mentors. You mentioned them before. They helped you get into coaching. Tell us about them.
Don't worry, we're still on the journey. This is not too off topic. I thought you were just gonna ask my favorite pie was. I was like, no, this is good.
That's next. We need to know now. So.
That's the one. That's the one right after. Okay, I'll be sure to be prepared. I actually don't like pie that much, but anyways, just staying focused on this. So what I would say is mentors. I have a lot of mentors. You know, Seth Godin says that the difference between a hero and a mentor is a hero is someone you look up to and you never get to meet in your life, and a mentor is someone you can talk to on a consistent basis. So the answer would be for those two would be different. I would say for mentors, one is definitely my business partner. Vamsi's been a big influence in my career. He's the one who really pushed me to take Master Talk seriously as a business. Because before I met him, I was just some kid making videos for fun in my basement. He's the one who said, hey, look, you're a really good coach. You should charge executives thousands of dollars for your time. And he was right. I could do it. I just needed someone to give me that helping hand. He was a big influence. He's one. I would say another mentor is obviously my mom. My mom really taught me the importance of generosity and giving back. I think that's why Master Talk started as just for freebie. Like, it was never about me getting paid to do anything. It was just about helping people out. And I really got that from my mom.
And I really understand about your mom real quick. We do know that she's got a pretty awesome basement. So
she does. Yeah, it's a pretty sick basement.
Sorry to interrupt you. So.
No, you're okay. It's a sick basement. And then the third piece, I mean, I would say the third mentor that I don't have access to. I mean, Gary Vee's a big one for me as well because he's done so well. And I think what I love about him is there's no excuses. Even with the net worth, the success he has, he's still in the morning yelling at his phone, doing his Instagram stories every day. And I love that. It really shows us that what excuse do we have to not follow our dreams? That guy is not getting lazy, and he's a million times more successful than all of us. And that's a lesson in of itself.
Wow, so true. All right. Favorite dessert?
Favorite dessert, tiramisu.
Ooh, good choice.
If done right. Not every tiramisu is good, but if you go to the right Italian place, my God.
Recommendation for good Italian place in Montreal.
I don't have a good answer to that, unfortunately.
Okay.
Good. I have a good restaurant recommendation though.
Okay. All right.
That I can do.
Please tell us.
Excuse any vegans or vegetarians listening to this, but there's a great chicken place in Montreal that is just to die for. It's called Ma Poule Mouillée, which is French for wet chicken. I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. It is the #1 rated restaurant in Canada.
Okay.
It's just nobody knows about it. So it's basically like Portuguese chicken. It's $10, best, and for you guys in the States, I mean, what is that? Like $2
No,
US?
no, 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 no.
Like
Seven
50,
fifty. It's not
it's like
that.
50
I
cents.
I don't think the exchange rate's that bad. So
I know, I'm trying to make a
it
joke, man.
actually
I'm
might be
just
$10, right? It might actually be $12 now with inflation. So
I'm just poking fun. But yeah, it's super cheap. It's amazing. I brought people from 5 different countries to that chicken place. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it is spot on. So check it
wow.
out. Mapulmuye.
I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it. I'm just gonna call
You
you when I'm in
really shouldn't.
Montreal and say we're going to the wet chicken.
We're
So
going to the wet chicken.
what is one lesson that your job has taught you that everybody should learn?
What is one lesson? I would say one. It's a bit more. What is it? It's more general, but at the end of the day, I think it applies in business and definitely in coaching. The world will always make room for passionate people.
Hmm.
This is by Lewis Howes. I think he's so right. At the end of the day, what I love about business, especially as a coach, is you don't have to be the smartest guy out there. If you're the most committed to your clients, you're the most excited. You show up on Nate's podcast if you're on Joe Rogan every single time, the market value will eventually catch up to you. And that's
Hmm.
why I've been able to build a very successful business for myself very early in my life because a lot of people believed in me, not just because of my expertise or my YouTube videos or the success on my socials, but really because my energy is contagious that they want to work with me.
I love it. All right. If you were to start a completely different business tomorrow, not coaching, not allowed to start coaching anymore, it's illegal in Canada. What would that business be?
I would go back to being a job. I would have a job, honestly.
If you couldn't coach, you would just have a job. What would that
Yep.
job be?
I would
Accounting?
I would go back to IBM. I would just be a consultant.
Got it. Okay. Is there any other hobbies or occupations you'd like to try?
To be honest, dude, I mean, there's a lot of things I do for fun outside of business. Like I karaoke in 8 different languages. I go to clubs all the time. I just came back for a crap ton of dance parties. That's why I was in Columbus for like a few days for a conference.
I
Super
had no
fun.
idea.
Yeah, it's all good.
That's
But the point is I'm a pretty focused guy. Like even for business, I'm sure you were surprised when I said, "Oh, I would start a business on this." Nah. And the reason is because I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. The only reason business is so hard. I don't know what's up with our culture these days. You have to really like it. Like obviously it's hard, but you need to really be obsessed about the business that you're in or else you won't win in business because you actually have to deliver market value to the marketplace. You can't just sit at a government job and just get paychecks in business. And I think that's why I don't think I would be in business. I would just be happier working a 9 to 5 job if I wasn't a coach.
hmm. Just gotta really find that thing, or it's just not gonna work for you. All right, I got a couple of questions here at the end, Brendan. I really appreciate you being on the Journey podcast. I feel like we could talk for a few more hours, but and you probably won't have any problem with that because you're a communications guy. So,
For sure, man.
but if you're speaking, I think you're reading. What are 3 books you would recommend to the audience?
I'll recommend one because I know people don't buy 3 books from a pod. So I'll give you my best one of all time. Thirst by Scott Harris. I love your face. You're like I'm like the first guest to break your rule. You're like, how dare he? Anyways, so Thirst by Scott Harrison is the best book I've read in my life, and I'll tell you why. Because I believe Scott's one of the best storytellers on the planet. For those who don't know, Scott Harrison is the CEO of Charity Water. It's a nonprofit he started to help people gain access to clean water. The guy literally went, Nate, from a nightclub promoter in his 20s in New York City to building the largest, not one of the largest, the largest water charity in America. And he's raised $100 million just in the last year to get
Wow.
people access to clean water. I think the guy's brilliant and he's a must read for anybody. And there's a quote in the book that I always like to share in a pod. And the quote is simply this: the goal is not to live forever, but rather create something that will.
Hmm. Fantastic. Go check out that book recommendation from Brendan here. All right, Brendan, if somebody is starting a business or starting something today, what is a piece of advice you would give them?
I would say get a job, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of people, they jump into entrepreneurship with no backup plan, and I think that's a really stupid idea. This is why my best piece of advice in that realm is always side hustle comfortably. I had a very nice job before I went into entrepreneurship. And the reason I like really nice jobs, and it doesn't need to be IBM, it could be like being a plumber. I consider that a really nice job. And the reason is because it pays a lot. Right? So if you're really good at manual work, you like handy work, not like me, I suck at that. I'm terrible with my hands. Right? Then be a plumber, do that. Why? Because it's a guaranteed paycheck. But once you have a guaranteed paycheck, what happens is your mind starts to free up. You have a lot more space to think. So I always start there. And then the other piece that I'll add, which is a little bit over your question, but let me just add it as a caveat, is before I quit my job, I had ducked every row. I had a 9-month emergency fund. I had built existing relationships with IBM in case I screwed up in business so I could just run right back. And I had a clear plan to fully replace my income in 90 days, and I did it in 60. And I had already replaced half of my income. So there's a lot of things I did before quitting corporate. That's why I was a successful entrepreneur, and most people don't talk enough about that emergency plan.
Wow. And I wish I would have done it myself. So here we are. It's a lot harder road. All right, Brenden, is there any questions you wish I would have asked you today?
Nah, man, I think you did a great job.
Well, I appreciate that. Tell the audience where they can find you online so they can become one of the 1% communicators in the world.
For sure, man. Great to be on your show, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Of course. So 2 ways to keep in touch. Number 1, go to the YouTube channel. Just type Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas for free. And number 2 is come to one of my free workshops. I do a free communication workshop over Zoom every 2 weeks. These are not some recorded webinar. They're live, they're free, they're interactive, and they're fun. And if you want to jump in on one of those, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
Awesome. Rockstarcommunicator.com or Master Talk on YouTube. I'm definitely going to check out one of these webinars because this was a lot of fun, and I like to have fun because work and life is hard enough as it goes, so you might as well have fun while we do it. So
There you go.
be a better communicator. I really appreciate your time today, Brenden. This was awesome. It was great to spend time with you.
Likewise, Nate. Thanks for the time.
All right. You have a great day.